Every army that has ever marched into battle has done the same thing, picked up what the enemy left behind. It's as old as war itself. But the Second World War was different, not just in scale, but in what soldiers took, why they took it, and what those objects meant when they finally came home. This is every item WW2 soldiers stole from the enemy and kept ranked, from the things they barely held onto to the objects they never let go of, even decades after the war ended. Kicking off the list at number 20 is something so obvious it almost doesn't count as stealing: enemy rations and food. From the moment Allied boots hit North Africa in 1942, soldiers discovered that German iron rations, the eisern portion, contained things their own rations often didn't. Hard chocolate, ersatz coffee, Zwieback crackers that actually held their shape. Pacific soldiers raiding Japanese positions found rice, dried fish, and occasionally sake. The keeping here lasted exactly as long as it took to eat. Nobody shipped home a tin of Wehrmacht sardines, but in the moment, grabbing enemy food wasn't looting, it was lunch. Soldiers didn't think twice about it, and neither should we. It ranks last because it was gone before sundown. Number 19. Enemy cigarettes. Every army in the war issued tobacco, and every soldier who ran out immediately helped himself to whatever the enemy had on hand. German cigarettes tasted different. Japanese tobacco was rougher. But nicotine is nicotine, and a man who'd been awake for 30 hours in a foxhole was not going to be picky. The cigarettes were smoked. The empty pack might ride in a pocket for a few days before falling out. No one framed it. At number 18. Enemy currency. Every soldier who walked through a shattered German town or a captured Japanese position eventually stuffed some Reichsmarks or military script into a pocket. Back home, these were exotic. At the front, they were paper. A Reichsmark note couldn't buy a meal in Belgium. Japanese occupation currency from the Philippines was worth nothing once the Japanese left. Soldiers kept these in letters home as curiosities. Look, real Nazi money, but they were never more than novelties. The exchange rate for enemy cash was essentially zero, which is exactly where it ranks. Next up is number 17, and this is where things get genuinely interesting: the steel hand granate, the German stick grenade. GIs called it the potato masher, and they loved it, not as a souvenir, but as a weapon. The wooden handle gave you a longer throwing arc than the pineapple-style American M2 grenade, and soldiers in Italy and France figured this out fast. The problem with keeping one was obvious: it was live ordnance. You could use it, but you couldn't exactly stuff it in your duffel bag and mail it to Ohio. A few soldiers tried to bring deactivated examples home, and customs officials had a lot of opinions about that. High on the improvised use list, essentially zero on the lifetime keepsake list. Moving on to number 16. German gas mask canisters. As the war progressed and it became clear that neither side would use chemical weapons in ground combat, German soldiers increasingly tossed their gas masks but left the cylindrical metal canisters lying everywhere. Allied soldiers discovered these, made excellent general-purpose containers. You could carry rations, spare socks, personal items, even water in a pinch. The canister went everywhere for a while, then gradually got replaced by better gear and left behind somewhere in France or Germany, kept for months, remembered by almost nobody. Let's continue with number 15. Enemy boots and clothing. This one comes with some dignity attached, because the men who took enemy gear weren't souvenir hunting, they were surviving. American soldiers in the brutal Italian winter of 1943 sometimes wore German wool coats because their own cold weather gear hadn't arrived. Marines in the Pacific occasionally grabbed Japanese canvas leggings when their own boots were rotting off their feet. The problem was practical. Wearing enemy kit could get you shot by your own side. Officers ordered men to strip it off. It was kept out of desperation, abandoned the moment resupply arrived. Number 14 is the German Kochgeschirr, the Wehrmacht mess kit. This is the item on this list that soldiers kept for purely functional reasons and zero bragging rights. The German aluminum mess kit was well designed, stackable and durable. Some GIs genuinely preferred it to their own equipment. It traveled home with a few veterans, lived in camping gear for years, and was occasionally puzzled over by grandchildren who didn't know what it was. No glory attached, just a good piece of kit that outlasted the war. Up next we have the Arisaka Type 99 at number 13. Pacific Theater GIs and Marines took Japanese rifles as proof that they'd been there, proof that they'd won a particular fight. The Type 99 was Japan's standard issue bolt action, and it was actually a reasonably solid rifle. But Allied soldiers had almost no use for it in combat. The caliber was 7.7mm, which nobody else issued, and spare ammunition wasn't exactly available at the quartermaster. So the Arisaka became a souvenir weapon. Men got them home, some got them deactivated, and they ended up above fireplaces in American living rooms. More common than you think, less exciting than everything that comes next. Coming in next at number 12, the Karabiner 98 Kurz or Kar 98K, the standard German infantry rifle. If the Arisaka was the Pacific's common trophy rifle, the Kar 98 was Europe's. Millions were manufactured, millions were abandoned. Every GI who walked through a German position in France or Germany had the opportunity to grab one, and plenty did. The problem with the Kar 98K as a trophy is exactly that commonness, everyone had one. The bolt-action Mauser was a fine rifle, with a beautiful stock and satisfying action, but when something is lying in a ditch every 100 yards, it loses its cachet. Veterans brought them home by the thousands. Gun shows today are full of them. A 12 ranking feels appropriate for something you tripped over on the way to Berlin. Now things start to get interesting. Number 11. The Japanese Nambu Type 14 pistol. In the Pacific, an enemy officer's sidearm was the trophy to get. The problem was that the Nambu Type 14 was, to put it charitably, a terrible pistol. Weak firing pin springs meant misfires were common. The grip was uncomfortable for most Western hands. The safety was awkward, but none of that mattered in 1944, because it wasn't really a weapon anymore, it was a statement. Marines who came home with a Nambu were saying, "I was there, I took this from someone who was trying to kill me, and here it is." The pistol's reputation for unreliability is actually well documented, which makes the stories around it better, not worse. It ranks here because it was coveted but compromised. Here's where the ranking heats up. Number 10. The MP-40 submachine gun. Allied soldiers did not merely collect the MP-40, they used it. In the close quarters fighting of Normandy's bocage country, Italian buildings, and North African alleyways, the MP-40's compact firepower and manageable size made it genuinely attractive. British soldiers in the Desert War were especially enthusiastic about captured examples. The downside was immediate and serious. The distinctive sound of an MP-40 firing that recognizable mechanical chatter told everyone nearby that either a German was shooting or something had gone very wrong. Friendly fire was a documented risk. Officers confiscated MP-40s for this reason. Still, men hid them, used them, and some got them home. A real combat weapon, a real souvenir, but too dangerous to keep in the field and too common to sit at the top. Moving into more capable territory with number 9, German fighting knives and daggers. Germany produced an enormous variety of edged weapons, gravity knives for paratroopers, boot knives for infantry, ornate dress daggers for officers, and the infamous SS dagger with its motto etched into the blade. Every one of these combined 3 qualities that made a perfect souvenir. They were useful, they were beautiful, and they were unmistakably German. A good knife never needs ammunition. It doesn't jam, it fits in a boot. Soldiers carried captured German blades through the rest of their campaigns and then carried them home. The officer's dress dagger, in particular black handle, silver fittings, eagle head pommel, became one of the signature objects of the European war. High utility, high beauty, high rank on this list. Number 8. The Japanese Hinomaru flag, what American soldiers call the meatball flag. This item is different from everything else on this list because of what it actually was. A Japanese soldier's Hinomaru flag, the white cloth rectangle with the red disc at its center, was typically signed before he left Japan. His family, his neighbors, his friends, his co-workers at the factory or the school, everyone who knew him wrote their names and wishes in the margins. It was a talisman, it meant home. Marines who found these on fallen Japanese soldiers were holding something profoundly personal, and they knew it. Decades later, some veterans and their families began returning these flags to Japan through organizations that traced the signatures back to surviving families. The reunions were emotional in ways that no other category of war loot could produce. The Hinomaru ranks here because of its emotional weight, which was heavier than almost anything else taken from any battlefield. But that weight was deeply personal. One man, one family, one community. What comes next is different. This was impersonal mythology, and that made it universally coveted. Approaching the legends now. Number 7. The Iron Cross. Germany's most iconic military decoration, awarded for bravery in combat, the Iron Cross was the trophy that every GI in Europe wanted. Officers collected full sets, men traded other items to get one. The Iron Cross existed in multiple classes: second class, first class, the Knight's Cross worn at the throat, and each step up the ladder represented something more dangerous and more desirable. They came home by the thousands, showed up in shadow boxes, in desk drawers, in family attics. They still do. The Iron Cross sits at number 7 because it was the most universally recognized German military symbol, and because acquiring one felt like taking a piece of the enemy's mythology. We have the German Zeiss Binoculars at number 6. This is the most practical item in the upper tier of this list, and the reason it ranks this high is simple. German optics in the Second World War were not just good, they were definitively measurably better than what Allied soldiers were issued. Zeiss had been making precision optical instruments for decades. The standard 6x30 Dienstglas carried by German infantry officers and the 10x50 models used in artillery and command roles were clearer, sharper, and more durable than comparable Allied equipment. American and British soldiers who grabbed a pair of Zeiss binoculars off a German officer quickly realized they were holding something that outperformed their own gear. They kept them because they worked better. They sent them home because they were worth money. They are, 60 years later, still highly sought after by collectors. This is the rare war trophy that was also genuinely the best tool for the job. Number 5. The German Stahlhelm, the coal scuttle helmet. If you had to pick one object whose silhouette instantly says the Second World War to anyone who's ever seen a photograph or a film, the Stahlhelm is on the shortlist. Its distinctive flared rim and deep bowl were engineered for real protection, and it worked better than the American M1 helmet in some respects. But soldiers didn't hang these on their walls because of ballistic science. They hung them because that shape meant something. A Stahlhelm above a fireplace in rural Ohio or rural England said, "I was there. I faced the thing that wore this, and I came home." The helmet's iconographic power has not faded in 80 years. Now we're in elite territory. Number 4. SS insignia and rank badges. The SS Death's Head, the twin lightning bolt runic insignia, the color tabs and rank badges of Hitler's ideological army. These items sit at the top of this list, and also at the center of one of its most uncomfortable conversations. American soldiers who took SS insignia knew not abstractly, but concretely what SS units had done. By spring of 1945, soldiers had walked through the evidence. Taking SS insignia wasn't casual trophy collecting. It was a darker statement about what these objects meant. The demand for SS memorabilia was so high among Allied soldiers that, according to some veterans' accounts, a secondary market developed. German soldiers would reportedly strip SS insignia of corpses to trade to Americans for cigarettes, food, or other goods. The controversy hasn't diminished. SS items remain the most debated category of war loot in collector communities to this day. They rank 4th because no other item on this list carried this much psychological weight in both directions. Taking the bronze medal at number 3, the Walther P-38. When the German military adopted the P-38 in 1938 with mass production fully underway by 1940, it was replacing the most coveted handgun in the German arsenal. The P-38 was a double-action semi-automatic. You could fire it without manually cocking the hammer, which made it faster and safer to operate than what it replaced. Allied officers who captured P-38s quickly discovered that they had a genuinely excellent pistol. American officers carried captured P-38s as personal sidearms. British officers did the same. They were reliable, accurate, comfortable to shoot, and clearly superior for practical use to some of what the Allies were issuing. The P-38 is the gun that soldiers kept, not as a trophy but as a weapon, which is the highest functional compliment you can pay any firearm. It sits at 3 because what it replaced was even more legendary. In second place, crossing from Europe to the Pacific, the Japanese officer's katana, A genuine Japanese officer's sword, some hand-forged in centuries-old tradition, others mass-produced for the war, but still, symbols of samurai heritage was the single most prized trophy in the Pacific theater. Marines and soldiers knew what these swords were. Some had been in families for generations. Some carried the names of their makers on the blade. Taking a katana was taking a piece of Japanese history, Japanese culture, Japanese identity. The lengths men went to acquire them are documented in dozens of memoirs. Officers carried them home wrapped in their bedrolls. Some were ceremonially surrendered Japanese commanders, offering their swords to Allied counterparts as the formal gesture of defeat. Those surrendered swords carried the full weight of what ending a war looks like. The katana ranks second, because no other item in the Pacific theater came close to the same combination of beauty, rarity, and cultural significance. And finally, the undisputed champion, the German Luger P08. In the European theater of the Second World War, if you could have only one souvenir, if you could bring home only one object to prove where you had been and what you had faced, every American, British, Canadian and Australian soldier in Europe knew the answer before you finished asking the question. The Luger. The Georg Luger designed semi-automatic pistol with its distinctive toggle lock action and angled grip had been in German service since 1908. By the time American GIs landed in North Africa in 1942, the Luger was already a legend recognizable from newsreels, from photographs, from the hands of every German officer the Allies had seen. Soldiers didn't just want a Luger, they wanted a specific Luger, one taken under fire from a real enemy in a real fight. Men traded almost anything for them. Extra rations, personal gear, watches, money. Officers offered cigarettes, alcohol, other weapons. In some units, a Luger was currency. The toggle lock mechanism, the beautifully machined frame, the way it sat in the hand, these things made the Luger feel like an artifact from a more precise, more mechanical world. Hundreds of thousands came home with American veterans. They sat in sock drawers, in gun safes, in glass cases, in dens and living rooms. They showed up at every gun show. They still do. 80 years after the war ended, the German Luger P08 remains the most recognized, most desired and most traded piece of Second World War military hardware in the world. It is the definitive answer to the question of what soldiers wanted when they reached across the line and took something from the enemy to keep.